Amal stepped out of the rideshare car and adjusted her blouse, inhaling deeply before walking toward the familiar house where she had spent most of her life. Laughter and upbeat music floated into the evening air as friends and relatives gathered in the backyard for her cousin's engagement celebration. Children darted past her feet, the scent of grilled meat and spice hanging in the breeze. To everyone else, this was a joyous evening. But to Amal, it was just another reminder of where she didn't belong. She greeted a few aunts with polite nods, exchanged distant smiles, and avoided the gazes of people who once judged her for not being traditional enough. Her heels crunched lightly on the stone path leading to the garden, and as she passed under the fairy lights, she spotted her mother near the drinks table, surrounded by relatives. Ma Thandile looked her way briefly but offered no smile, no warmth, just a cold flicker of acknowledgement before turning back to her conversation. It didn't surprise Amal. Their relationship had long soured. Control was Ma Thandile's language of love, and Amal had stopped listening. While standing near the buffet, Amal's phone buzzed. She glanced down, expecting a message from a colleague. Instead, her heart briefly paused. Locks changed. You no longer live here. No greeting, no warning. Just that. She read it again to be sure. The words sat on the screen, sterile and final. She didn't react, didn't flinch. She placed a piece of grilled chicken on her plate, then looked up slowly and scanned the garden. Children still laughed. Adults raised their glasses. Her mother, far off near the gazebo, sipped from a wine glass like nothing had happened. Amal slipped the phone into her purse and smiled faintly. No drama, no scene, not even a tear. If anything, she felt oddly light. The house she had grown up in had never truly felt like home. It had been a place of rules, silent accusations, emotional manipulation. And now, finally, she was being pushed out physically. But what they didn't know was that she'd already left emotionally, spiritually, and mentally years ago. As the celebration carried on, Amal sat at the edge of the gathering, watching quietly. The message that was meant to hurt her did not succeed. Instead, it confirmed what she had always suspected. She was no longer theirs to control. They think they've shut me out, she thought, taking a slow sip of her drink. But I left that door long ago. Long before the text that changed everything, Amal had known what it meant to feel like an outsider in her own home. It hadn't started with a slammed door or a dramatic fight. It had been slower, quieter. Like erosion, it wore her down over time. She remembered coming home late from her first internship at a major firm, exhausted but proud. All she'd wanted was to share her excitement. Instead, Ma Thandile had glanced at her watch and asked coldly, "Are you even part of this family anymore? Always chasing things outside." Amal had been 19 then. Over the years, the words changed, but the message stayed the same. You think you're better than everyone now. That attitude of yours will leave you lonely. Maybe if you acted more like a proper daughter, things would be easier for you. Her independence, something that should have made them proud, was treated like rebellion. When she bought her first laptop with her own money, her mother said it was wasteful. When she was promoted at work, her father's only comment was, "You should help your brother get a job too." When she offered to pay for home repairs, Ma Thandile would take the money, but never thank her. Instead, she'd complain that Amal was trying to buy respect. Her brother, Si, was the golden one, the one who never paid a bill, never lifted a finger, and yet always got the praise. If he washed a dish, he was called responsible. If Amal paid the electricity bill, it was just what daughters should do. She remembered one night clearly. She had just wired money to cover part of the roof repair. Her mother took the envelope from her hand and without looking up said, "You're just doing your part. Don't expect applause." And she hadn't. Not anymore. So when the message came, cold and cutting, locks changed. You no longer live here. Amal didn't read it as a beginning. It was a final punctuation mark. The end of a long sentence that had been dragging on for years. A sentence written in disregard, favoritism, and emotional neglect. They thought they were exiling her. What they didn't know was that she had already exiled them in her heart, quietly, long ago. The party wound down as dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and navy. Amal remained poised, laughter soft on her lips when needed, her eyes scanning each relative like she was seeing them for the last time. And maybe she was. There were no dramatic confrontations, no accusations hurled across the garden. She smiled, hugged her cousin, whispered congratulations, and even thanked Ma Thandai with the same calm tone one uses with distant acquaintances. Her mother returned a stiff nod, not realizing this was Amal's final performance as the obedient daughter. As the music dimmed and guests began to leave, Amal quietly slipped away into the night. Her steps were sure, her shoulders relaxed. There was no looking back. She didn't head to the house. There was no need. She had already made peace with never walking through that gate again. Instead, she took a different route, one she had rehearsed in her mind for months. Within 30 minutes, she was in front of a small, well-kept apartment building on the other side of town. She pulled out a key and opened the door to Unit 2C. Everything inside smelled new. Neutral walls, soft lighting, a couch she had picked out herself, still wrapped in plastic. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. She had started renting the place months ago, paying quietly, furnishing it little by little. She hadn't told anyone, not friends, not co-workers, not even her closest cousin. This was her exit plan, her secret landing space. On the kitchen table lay a folder neatly labeled property documents, tucked next to a small savings file labeled Emergency Freedom. Every decision she had made in the last year had been leading to this. Amal changed into soft clothes, brewed herself a cup of rooibos tea, and curled up by the window, watching the city lights flicker. She felt no anger, no sadness, just an overwhelming sense of stillness, of peace. They think they kicked me out, she thought, wrapping the blanket tighter around her. But you can't kick someone out who already walked away in their mind. This wasn't an exile. It was an escape she orchestrated herself, in silence, with grace, and on her own terms. 2 days after the party, Amal was sitting at her small apartment desk, finalizing a quarterly report for a client when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She let it ring once, twice, then something nudged her to pick up. "Hello." "Amal," came a calm but serious voice. "It's Mr. Dlamini. I'm sorry to disturb you, but we need to talk. It's urgent. About the family house." Amal leaned back in her chair, surprised. Mr. Dlamini had been their family's lawyer for decades, a quiet, meticulous man who handled everything from land disputes to wills. She hadn't heard from him in years. "Of course," she said, her voice even. "What's going on?" There was a pause. Then he said, "There's been a mistake. A big one. Your mother contacted me yesterday, trying to formalize your removal from the title. But when I opened the files, I realized something critical. The house still legally belongs to you." Amal blinked. "I'm sorry. Your grandmother, before she passed, filed a title amendment. She left the property to you outright. Ma Thandai never finalized any transfer. Technically, your name is the only legal one on the deed. They can't evict you from a home you legally own." The room around Amal went quiet, not with shock, but with clarity. Of course, her grandmother, the only person who had truly seen her. Years ago, during her final days, Gogo had held Amal's hand and whispered, "You don't belong under their shadow. One day, you'll need a space that's yours. I made sure you'll have it." Amal had assumed it was just affection, an old woman's parting words. But it wasn't. It had been protection. "They tried to push me out of something that was mine," Amal murmured. Mr. Dlamini cleared his throat. "They don't know you're aware, but Ma Thandai is trying to clean up the paperwork. If you don't act, she might try to contest the will. I advise you come in. Bring any documents you have." Amal opened the drawer, calmly lifting the folder labeled Property Documents. "I'll be there in the morning," she replied. "Thank you, Mr. Dlamini." They thought they cut the cord. They thought they changed the locks. But they forgot Amal had always held the title. They never owned what they tried to take away. The smell of antiseptic and warm porridge lingered in the small hospice room where Amal's grandmother, Gogo Lindau, spent her final days. The walls were pale, the windows open to let in the soft breeze of a fading summer. Amal had been there every evening after work, feeding her, listening to her stories, rubbing her feet when the pain flared. Gogo Lindau had always been more than a grandmother. She had been Amal's shield, her quiet protector. And in those final days, her words were sharper, more deliberate. "They don't see you, Amal," she said once, while staring out at the jacaranda tree. "But I do. I see the woman you're becoming." Amal had dismissed it gently. "Gogo, it's fine. I'm used to it." But her grandmother wasn't finished. She reached under her pillow and handed Amal a worn envelope. "I changed the will. I want you to have the house. Not because it's big or beautiful, but because you need a foundation that no one else can take. This is for your future, not their pride." Amal had cried quietly that night, clutching the envelope, unsure what to say. She never told her mother, never even hinted at the change. It felt sacred, a promise between the two of them. She had locked the documents away in a private safe, out of reach and out of memory, until now. Sitting across from Mr. Dlamini in his modest office 2 days after the party, Amal placed the faded envelope on his desk. Inside was the updated will, the notarized deed change, and copies of communication with the land office. Mr. Dlamini read each page carefully, his eyebrows knitting in disbelief. "They had no idea," he finally asked, voice low. Amal folded her hands. "They never cared to ask. I was always just the help, the wallet when things broke, the disappointment when things didn't go their way." He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "This changes everything." "No," Amal said quietly, rising from the chair. "It just confirms what's always been true." She walked out of the office lighter than she'd felt in years. Gogo had seen her worth long before anyone else did, and had made sure the world couldn't ignore it forever. The morning after Amal's meeting with Mr. Dlamini, her phone lit up with the first of many calls. Ma Thandile. Then again, and again. By midday, it was 15 missed calls and a handful of voice notes, each one more manipulative than the last. "Amal, this is your mother. Call me back, please. You're still part of this family. Let's not blow things out of proportion. Don't let outsiders come between blood." Amal listened to none of them. She simply watched the screen light up, then dim. Her thumb hovered over the block option more than once, but she wasn't ready for silence just yet. Not until they understood what silence really meant. By the third day, her brother's sighs were chimed in. His message was short and laced with entitlement. "Come home. You're being dramatic. This is all a misunderstanding." Amal stayed at it, unimpressed. The same man who watched her carry the financial burden for years, who once laughed when their mother called her too Western, now wanted to play mediator. She deleted the message without replying. Instead, she poured her energy into something productive. She hired her own legal team. They met in a small conference room near her office. 3 women in sharp suits who listened intently as Amal laid out his situation. Title deed, grandmother's will, documentation, her legal rights. Within hours, formal letters were drafted and sent to Ma Thandile and Size. "You are hereby notified that continued occupation of the property is unlawful. You are required to vacate the premises within 21 days or begin paying monthly rent with backdated arrears and taxes due from the date of transfer." It was simple, professional, brutal in its precision. Amal didn't need to yell. She didn't need to argue. She didn't even need to pick up the phone. Her silence, backed by ironclad paperwork and calm resolve, spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. In the quiet of her apartment that night, Amal brewed her tea and let the phone vibrate in the other room. They wanted to act like nothing happened, but something had. And this time, it was her turn to decide what happened next. On a humid Thursday morning, a government-licensed courier walked up to the front gate of the house Ma Thandile so proudly ruled. Clad in a neutral uniform, he posted the eviction notice right on the iron gate, thick white paper sealed in plastic, stamped officially in red ink. The bold words at the top read, "Notice to vacate, by order of legal ownership." Within hours, whispers swept through the neighborhood like wildfire. The Mabuza family, known for their sharp tongues and prideful Sunday appearances, were being asked to leave. And not by a stranger, by their own daughter. At the corner grocer, neighbors exchanged theories. "Did you hey? I thought Amal lived elsewhere now." Apparently, The house was haze all along. By Sunday, even the church was buzzing. Ma Thandao stood stiffly during service, lips pressed thin while others offered her those pitying, sideways glances, the kind that said, "We know." That evening, when the whispers became unbearable, she burst into tears in front of extended relatives who had come to check in. She paced in the living room, wringing her hands. "She's turning her back on us," Ma Thandao cried, "attacking her own blood, her own family, over a misunderstanding." Sighs, sullen in the corner, said nothing. Not once did he acknowledge the years he had freeloaded. Not once did he question the morality of locking Amal out of her own home. When news of the breakdown reached Amal through a cousin's message, "You should call your mom. She's falling apart," she responded with nothing but a voice note to her lawyer. "Proceed with the 21-day timeline. No extensions." Her cousin called her cold. "Heartless. You're punishing them." Amal replied simply, "They told me I no longer lived there. I'm just making it official." There was no malice in her voice, no vengeance in her heart, only clarity. She had spent years giving attention, money, presence, only to be told she was a guest in her own family. Now, she wasn't reclaiming space out of spite. She was just reclaiming what was already hers. If they wanted to live like she didn't exist, then it was time to live with the consequences. And this time, there would be no going back. A week after the eviction notice landed, Amal received an invitation to a family meeting hosted at her Uncle Thabo's home. The message came wrapped in politeness, but the intent was clear. They wanted to confront her, or more precisely, to correct her. She went, not because she owed them anything, but because she wanted them to see who she had become, a woman who no longer flinched at raised voices or weaponized guilt. The room was already packed when she arrived. Aunties, uncles, cousins, even a family friend or two. Plates of samosas sat untouched on the side table. They didn't bother with small talk. How Aunt Boozy started. "Amal, this isn't the way. We are family. Family doesn't sue family," added Uncle Thabo, folding his arms across his chest. "You've made your mother cry every night," another aunt chimed in, eyes narrowed. "You've always been distant, but this is too far." Amal sat quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She let them speak. Let them pour out their performance of outrage and false concern. Then, one cousin stood and said the line they had all been circling around. "Blood is thicker than paper, Amal. Don't destroy your family over documents and pride." She smiled faintly. "You're right. Blood is thicker than paper." The room exhaled, thinking they'd finally gotten through. Then she added, her tone still calm, but laced with steel. "But where was blood when my mother sent me a text? Not a conversation, not even a phone call, telling me I no longer live in the house I helped pay for. Where was blood when I was tossed aside like a stranger?" Silence settled. Awkward, heavy, undeniable. "I didn't destroy this family," Amal continued. "I simply stopped pretending I wasn't already pushed out of it." Uncle Thabo tried to interject, but she stood up, gathering her purse. "You called this a family meeting, but I see now it was an intervention, an attempt to guilt me back into silence." She looked around one last time. "You all raised your voices. I simply raised my standards." And with that, she walked out, heels clicking steadily on the tile floor. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The following day, the internet began to buzz. Sizu posted a heartfelt message on Facebook, drenched in selective truths. "It breaks my heart to see our family torn apart. My sister, once so sweet, has taken everything from us. Our home, our peace. We raised her. We loved her. And now, we're being left in the cold." The post spread like wildfire. Sympathy poured in from distant relatives, old schoolmates, even strangers. Comment after comment declared Amal cold-hearted, too proud, too modern, forgetting her roots. Ma Thandao followed up with her own post, a grainy photo of her holding Amal as a baby. Captioned, "She once called me Mama. Now she calls lawyers." But the storm didn't last. Within hours, someone in the neighborhood shared the official documents. The updated will, the title deed, even the legal timeline. Mr. Dlamini, weary of the public distortion, confirmed the facts publicly and professionally. Amal is the legal owner of the property by documented inheritance. No eviction has been done in malice. This was a delayed truth, not a sudden attack. The narrative cracked. People who once condemned her began to go silent. A few brave ones even messaged her privately, offering quiet apologies. But Amal didn't reply. She didn't need validation. She had the truth. Si-Lence and Ma Fandai were now faced with an unmovable deadline, 1 week to vacate the property. Their emotional pleas had lost power. The law stood firm. Still, Amal extended one last olive branch. Through her legal team, she allowed a grace period, an additional 5 days to pack up and find temporary housing. No police. No locks changed by force. Just one firm condition. No direct contact. All communication must go through my lawyers. When the message reached Ma Fandai, she slammed the phone down in frustration. She's acting like a stranger. Si-Lence sat quietly for once. No arguments. No bravado. Just a low murmur. Maybe she's not acting. Maybe she became one. That night, the house that once overflowed with noise sat in silence. Cardboard boxes lined the hallway. The kitchen was bare, and in the center of it all, Ma Fandai stood still, staring at the front door. The same door she once told her daughter would always be open, until she slammed it shut with a single text. Now, they were the ones being shown the way out. A week later, Amal returned, not as a daughter, not as a tenant, but as a legal owner of the house that had once swallowed her dignity piece by piece. She stepped through the front gate alone, the key in her hand, cold but weightless. The house stood quiet now, emptied of furniture and ego. No laughter, no judgment, no one to critique how late she came home or how she spoke. The floorboards creaked beneath her heels as she walked slowly through each room. The living room where her childhood dreams were dismissed, the kitchen where her contributions were expected but never appreciated, the hallway where whispers behind closed doors used to follow her footsteps. She paused in her old bedroom, now stripped bare, the walls faded from sunlight and time. There were no tears, no nostalgia, just space, wide, open space she had earned but no longer needed. Mr. Dlamini walked in shortly after, clipboard in hand. "The house is officially in your possession," he said. "If you'd like, we can start preparing the move-in arrangements." Amal turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not staying." He blinked. "You're selling it." She nodded. "This house carries their ghosts, their expectations, their silence. I've built something stronger without it." Mr. Dlamini gave a quiet smile. He had watched her grow, watched her survive. Now, he was watching her choose something different. Freedom. By the end of the week, the listing was live. Within days, buyers began to inquire. A young couple expecting their first child, a retired teacher looking to start a home daycare. Amal didn't care who bought it, as long as it became something else, something better. Every cent from the sale, she funneled into the beginnings of her next purpose. A women's scholarship foundation in her grandmother's name. It would be for young women like her, ambitious, underappreciated, told to shrink themselves in service of family pride. It would pay for books, tuition, housing, and most importantly, choices. Amal didn't need to move back into that house to reclaim power. She just needed to close the door behind her, and this time, for good. 6 months later, Amal stood outside a modest single-story home nestled at the edge of a quiet neighborhood in another city. The walls were painted in warm earth tones, the garden blooming with flowers she chose herself, lavender, marigold, a small lemon tree near the gate. There was no grand gate, no towering facade, just peace. Inside, the rooms echoed not with silence, but possibility. No footsteps of someone waiting to criticize her, no shadow of a mother's disapproval lurking in the corners. Only sunlight through open windows, the soft hum of jazz from the radio, and the scent of independence. She unpacked slowly, thoughtfully. Each item she placed had meaning. No heirlooms from the old house. No reminders. This wasn't a continuation. It was a beginning. With the sale of the family home finalized, Amal had used the money to create something lasting. the Gogo Lindau Foundation, a scholarship and mentorship program for young women facing emotional and financial abuse at home. It started with just 3 girls. All had dreams. None had support. Amal mentored them personally. She taught them how to open their first bank accounts, how to speak with confidence during interviews, how to know the difference between love and control. Some came from homes just like Hayes, places where silence was demanded and independence punished. One afternoon, after a mentorship session, a shy girl named Nondi looked at her and said, "How did you survive it all?" Amal smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried stories and scars. "I thought I was locked out," she said. "But now I know. I was freed." Her voice didn't tremble. Her heart didn't ache. She wasn't pretending to be healed. She had actually done the work. Therapy, reflection, boundaries. And this time, when her phone rang with a familiar number, she didn't let it ring endlessly. She pressed block. And with that, she turned her focus back to the real work, building a future for women like her, with strength rooted not in revenge, but in rising above. Amal didn't need the family name anymore. She was writing a new one, in her grandmother's honor, in her own power. And the door she opened now, it was wide, it was hers, and no one else had the key. 1 year later, on an ordinary Thursday morning, a sealed envelope arrived at Amal's new home. It stood out among the usual bills and flyers, thick cream paper with familiar handwriting. Her hands paused when she saw the name in the corner. Marthandale Mabuza. She took it inside without urgency, made her tea, sat by the window, and then, slowly, opened it. The letter was handwritten, pages long. The ink wavered in places, as if written with shaking hands or through tears. It began with a familiar tone, motherly, soft, almost nostalgic. Then came the confessions. "We made mistakes," it said. "I didn't realize how much you were hurting. We lost the house, Si's lost his job, and we've been staying with an uncle in the rural village. We have nothing left." And then, finally, "Amal, please forgive us. Come back. We're still family." Amal finished reading without blinking. There was no triumph in her heart, no fire of vengeance. Just clarity, like the last window had finally been wiped clean. She walked to her small fire pit in the backyard, lit a match, and watched the letter curl into blackened ash. She didn't burn it out of hate. She burned it to release the last thread tying her to a past she had already outgrown. As the flames flickered and died, Amal stood still for a moment, remembering all the time she had begged for affection, for recognition, for space, and had been met with silence, mockery, or cold control. Now they begged, and she answered the way they had taught her to, with silence. Later that evening, as the sun set and the sky shifted to gold, she sat with her journal and wrote the closing words of her journey. "They changed the locks to keep me out, but I was always the one holding the key. You can't lock out someone who owns the door." And just like that, the chapter closed. Not with a bang, not with a scream, but with a woman standing in her own peace, unbothered, unbroken, and completely free.